So water is oxygen is group 6. So group 6 makes how many bonds? It makes group 6 makes 2 bonds. Okay, so that is going to make 2 bonds. And hydrogen has only 1 electron, so it only makes 1 bond. You can remember the number of bonds. Group 7 makes 1 bond, group 6 makes 2 bonds, group 5 makes 3 bonds, 4 needs 4 electrons, so it makes 4 bonds. So you got oxygen, and you got oxygen is supposed to make 2 bonds, and hydrogen makes only 1 bond. So oxygen is going to make the other bond with another hydrogen atom. So that's the structural formula. Make sure you draw the structural formula, and then you draw the dot and cross diagram. So it's oxygen with 2 hydrogens, and they're making 1 bond each. And oxygen should have 8 electrons, so there should be 4 electrons. These are lone pairs. If I do CF4, so in the case of CF4, carbon is group 4. Okay, carbon is in group 4 of the periodic table, so group 4 means it's going to make 4 bonds. And fluorine, on the other hand, is group 7. That makes only 1 bond. So carbon is supposed to make 4 bonds. Fluorine makes only 1 bond. So carbon would make the remaining 3 bonds with other fluorine atom. Fluorine makes 1 bond. Carbon makes the 3rd bond with another fluorine. And carbon makes a 4th bond with another fluorine. Okay, so carbon's 4 bonds are complete now. So this is what so there's going to be 1 carbon, and they're going to be 4 fluorines around it. Single bonds. All of them are single bonds. So 1 electron each shared here, 1 electron each, and 1 electron each. Up here, let me just check. Everyone has 8 electrons. Carbon has 8 electrons. Fluorine has 2 at the moment. So fluorine will have. So fluorine will have 6 more electrons. This fluorine will also have. Maybe 6 more. And all of them will have. So now all of them have 8 electrons. Okay, that's it. CH2O, carbon makes 4 bonds. Hydrogen makes only 1 bond. Carbon is group 4. So hydrogen makes only 1 bond. And there are 2 hydrogens. The other hydrogen will also make just 1 bond. And there's 1 oxygen. Oxygen is group 6. Group 6 kya karta hai? That makes 2 bonds. This is 4 bonds, right? Hydrogen makes 1 bond.
Sir, when do we use the double bond sign?
Oxygen makes 2 bonds, right? Now over here, remember, this is like a puzzle. Solving a puzzle. Carbon makes 4 bonds, right? So hydrogen makes only 1 bond, and there were 2 hydrogens over here. So 1 bond over here, 1 bond over here. Is that clear? So Urva, ab batao ki carbon ke how many bonds are left? Like
3.
2. 2 bonds ho gaye na, that's 1 and that's 2. Carbon has already 2 bonds. So it should be making 4 bonds. So there are 2 bonds left, and there's only 1 oxygen left, right? So the carbon of the remaining 2 bonds, who will it form with? You just have oxygen left, right? So you would have to put a double bond there. Where did you get this?
It's a little confusing.
फिर से explain. पहले तो ये part. Keep your mic on, ठीक है? ये तो clear ना? Carbon makes 4 bonds, hydrogen makes 1 bond, and oxygen makes 2 bonds, right? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
I told you before so we'll start with carbon, right? It's supposed to make 4 bonds, right? So 2 hydrogens, you've got 2 hydrogens, right? How many bonds does hydrogen make? 1 only, right? So just 1 bond. and there are two hydrogens. There's another hydrogen that makes another bond, right? Clear? Hydrogen is not issue. It's just supposed to make one bond, and you got two hydrogens in the formula. So one hydrogen over here, one over here, right? तो अब बताओ कार्बन के भी कितने bonds complete हुए हैं? It's got one bond over here, one bond over here. It's supposed to make 4 bonds. तो कितने रह गए बाकी?
2.
2. और ये clear है कि इसके सिर्फ 2 bonds रह गए? You just have 2 bonds left. But it's
Yes, sir.
atom कौन सा रह गया? Like you've used up the 2 hydrogens. You're only left with oxygen, right? There's only one oxygen left. But the formula के अंदर there's only one thing left. That's oxygen, right? तो अब मसला ये कि carbon has no other option. It's supposed to make 2 bonds. It's going to make 2 bonds with that oxygen. Or oxygen, how many bonds did oxygen want to make? It wanted to make 2 bonds. So carbon के दोनों bonds उसके साथ चले गए. Then that way carbon is able to make 4 bonds. I'll do some other examples similar to this, ठीक है? कि पहले तो इसका dot and cross diagram. The dot and cross diagram would look like this. It's इसके ऊपर मैं लिख लूँ, oxygen is making 2 bonds, carbon is making 4 bonds, right? So it's like a puzzle. You've solved the puzzle. 2 hydrogens there, they wanted to make 1 bond each. That's done. 1 oxygen wanted to make 2 bonds, and you had 1 carbon in the middle. The dot and cross ion is this thing. We're gonna use this to make the dot and cross. Okay, I've got carbon in the middle. I've got hydrogen. There's another hydrogen, right? And there's an oxygen, right? So it's carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, hydrogen. Between the carbon and hydrogen, you've got a single bond. That's 1 dot and 1 cross. Between the carbon and hydrogen, there's a single bond. That's 1 dot and 1. So between the carbon and oxygen, there's a double bond. So that one is 2 electrons shared. Well, oxygen के जो electrons हैं ना, I'm drawing it with shaded dots. So this thing translates into this thing. And then you have to ensure that each one has full outer shells. This one has 8 electrons. Oxygen over here should have 8 electrons as well. So at the moment it has 4 electrons. So there should be 4. So there's going to be 4 more electrons. So hydrogen has just 1 shell, the first shell, which has a maximum of 2 electrons. So that's it. Okay. So that's how it's going to look like. I'm going to change this to C2F4. That's how this one. Let's hold on a second, click on it. So HCN, H makes 1 bond. C group 4 makes 4 bonds. N is group 5, it makes 3 bonds. So remember, starting with H makes 1 bond. That's it. So let's make that bond with carbon. So hydrogen is supposed to make just 1 bond, that's it. So how many bonds does carbon want to make? It wants to make 4 bonds. Right now it's making...
It does 3 bonds with the nitrogen.
Okay, so you're only left with nitrogen. So the remaining 3 bonds with nitrogen. So the 4 bonds are done. 3 bonds over here are also done. and this wanted to make one bond. So that is also done. ठीक है, बाकी जो अगला part है ना, that is कि you got draw the
sir,
three
bonds
atoms.
mean the carbon is sir.
Is carbon is?
Carbon is sharing 3 electrons with nitrogen, right?
Huh.
Okay.
So that means 3 shared by carbon, 3 shared by nitrogen. लेकिन ये clear है ना, carbon 4 bonds are complete, one with hydrogen and one with 3 with nitrogen, right? So carbon's 4 bonds are complete. Nitrogen wanted to make 3 bonds only, and hydrogen wanted to make just 1 bond. अच्छा, तो यहाँ पे there's 1 bond. Over here there's a triple bond. So there's going to be 3 electrons each. Or फिर बाकी remaining electrons. Carbon should have 8 electrons, so it has 8 electrons around it. Hydrogen can only have 2 electrons. Nitrogen should have 8 electrons as well. So there are 2 electrons left for nitrogen, and that's the dot and cross diagram. So I'll just, I think I should do as a previous lectures, I sent it in the group. Make sure you watch the covalent dot and cross diagram from scratch. But I'll do a few more questions here. एक सेकंड देना. So let's do one more here. So here's another question. I've got a molecule of OCS. Right, so that's the name of that's the molecule, and I want to draw the dot and cross diagram. So oxygen is group 6. Group 6 का मतलब है it makes 2 bonds. Carbon is group 4, so it's supposed to make 4 bonds. Sulfur is group 6 as well, so it makes 2 bonds. अच्छा, इस case में how would the molecule look like? The structural formula: carbon is supposed to make 4 bonds. Sulfur wants to make 2 bonds. So sulfur will only make 2 bonds. अब बताओ carbon अपने remaining 2 bonds के साथ बनाए. It's going to make it with oxygen, because oxygen also wants to make 2 bonds, and in that way carbon's 4 bonds are complete. Is that clear? Well, what clear? This one, Ayan, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
So we'll just draw C. There's S, there's O, and double bond here. And double bond on the other side as well. Oxygen electrons are crosses and sulfur's electrons are shaded dots. Everyone should have 8 electrons. Carbon has 8 electrons. Look around it, it has 8 electrons. Sulfur should have 8 electrons as well. So at the moment, sulfur has 4 electrons. So So draw 4 more, which are lone pairs. And oxygen should have 8 electrons as well. Right now it has 4. So draw 4 more. Or let's try something. Let's do C2 H2. Wait just a second. Let's try. So let's try H C. Okay, let's try this one. Slightly more difficult. CO2 H2. Now this is very difficult. CO2 H2. Carbon. Now remember there are 2 oxygens. Carbon is supposed to make 4 bonds. And oxygen is group 6, so it's supposed to make 2 bonds. And hydrogen always makes just 1 bond. ठीक है, remember ये table याद रखना है, this table over here. कहाँ गया? ठीक है, group 7, how many bonds? Group 6, group 5, group 4. And hydrogen makes 1 bond. So if I go back, so let's try this one. Carbon is supposed to make 4 bonds, and there's only one carbon, so it should be making 4 bonds. Let's say I make a bond with hydrogen. Hydrogen only makes 1 bond. Right, I'm done. So hydrogen is done. Carbon should be making 3 more bonds. So let's say I put in an oxygen. Okay, now this oxygen over here wants to make 2 bonds. So why don't we just make 2 bonds between carbon and oxygen, right? So in that way, my oxygen is done. Okay, uske jo bonds are now complete ho gaye, okay? So it doesn't need any more bonds. That's fine. So how many more bonds does carbon need to make right now? Okay, then how many more bonds? क्या हो गया? Anyone? No, Shiva? Ayan, Urva?
Two more bonds.
नहीं, अभी count करो ना. How many bonds is it making? 1 with hydrogen, 2 with oxygen. So it's already making 3 bonds.
So one more bond.
Okay, 1 more bond, right? So it needs complete. It needs to make 4 bonds in total. So it needs 1 more bond, right? So it needs to make 1 more bond. So what do we have left? I've got another oxygen left, so I'm going to use that. That 1 bond is going to be with oxygen. You remember formula I had 2 oxygens, right? Achha, so carbon is done. Is this one? Iski bonding complete hai oxygen ki, or is it making the right number of bonds or not? No, oxygen ko kitne banane chahiye? It should be making 2 bonds. But at the moment, this oxygen is fine. There's nothing wrong with this oxygen. It's making 2 bonds. But this other oxygen is not fine. It's supposed to make 2 bonds, which it's not. So I've got a hydrogen left. So this oxygen can make a second bond. Uski bonding complete ho jayegi. And it can make it with hydrogen. And hydrogen wanted to make 1 bond. So I've got 2 hydrogens. I've got 1 carbon and 2 oxygens. Okay, all of them are connected in the right way. Okay, the carbon is making 4 bonds. The oxygen is making 2 bonds. This oxygen is also making 2 bonds. And the hydrogen is making 1 bond. This hydrogen is also making 1 bond. Ye clear hai? Ayan, Urva, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
And so let's do, and now drawing the dot and cross diagram would be easy. Okay, you've got a carbon, and next to it there oxygen, there's hydrogen, there's another hydrogen on this side, there's another oxygen on this side, right? So just put them together. You know the order, you know who makes how many bonds. So ये पहला क्या था? This hydrogen, this is carbon, this is oxygen. You've got hydrogen, this is another oxygen. Over here you had a double bond. So I'm going to put I've put double bond over there, right? So on the left side with hydrogen, there was a single bond. With this oxygen, there was a single bond. And this was also a single bond. Okay, oxygen ke electrons are shaded dots. So that's it. You got just a second. So over here you got a double bond, single bond, single bond, single bond. Or just 1 second. So Haris, are you in?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. You just write your complete name when you're entering, right? Because I didn't. Or give me a call if I don't respond, because I wouldn't be able to see what's going on in the group. Okay?
All right. Thank you.
Okay, is this one clear? Okay, you got carbon, oxygen, and you have to ensure that every atom has a full outer shell. So oxygen right now has 2 electrons here, 2 electrons here, so that's 4 electrons. So it should be having 4 more electrons, which are not bonding. And the carbon has 8 electrons. This oxygen has 4 electrons right now next to it. So it should be having 4 electrons. And so I'll make another video on this. I mean, I've shared the previous lectures as well. Go through this, okay? And we'll do cover more examples with this. But coming back to ये वाला तो clear है ना सारों को? Is this clear? This one, right? And remember, a lot of the questions would be very simple, right? It's they would be as simple as I mean, they often ask CO2. I mean, the HCN that we did. Okay, so a lot of them would be simple questions. Now, going back, I wanted to discuss properties of covalent molecules. So I'm just going to go. Now we're moving towards properties. Okay, we'll do dot and cross diagrams. I'll share another video lecture on this as well. Now, when did you have a covalent molecule? So I'm just going back. When you had 2 nonmetals bonding with each other, right? That's when covalent bonding happened. Why? Because nonmetals, they always like to gain electrons. So if you have 2 nonmetals, the hydrogen will try to gain electrons from this other hydrogen atom. This hydrogen, on the other hand, will try to gain electrons from this hydrogen atom. So they're basically trying to steal electrons from each other. Dono ek dusre ke electrons, they're both fighting over these electrons. And at the end of the day, the electrons get stuck right in the middle. Okay, so it's like 2 people fighting over electrons. Like this nucleus is trying to pull the electrons. This nucleus is also trying to pull the electrons. They're both trying to gain these electrons, and the electrons are stuck in the middle. And that's what a covalent bond is. It's electrons in the middle, the negative charge in the middle, and the 2 nucleuses both attracted to those electrons. And that is what's happening in all covalent bonds. The oxygen molecule was the same. The oxygen atom needed 2 electrons. It wanted to gain electrons. This oxygen atom also needed 2 electrons. So they both try to steal each other's electrons. वो इसके 2 electrons खींच रहा है, the other one is trying to pull the electrons from the other atom. And at the end of the day, the 4 electrons, they kind of get stuck in the middle. It's like 2 oxygen atoms, 2 people fighting over these 4 electrons, right? So that's your double covalent bond. That's what a covalent bond is, right? So no one ended up gaining and losing electrons. They ended up sharing electrons. Like the electrons are stuck in the middle. It's like a tug of war. The electrons are stuck in the middle. They can't go to this one or that one because both of them are equally attracting electrons, right? So that was the concept about covalent bonding. That's why atoms share electrons. Okay, the same happens with the fluorine atom, that fluorine had 7 electrons. This fluorine had 7 electrons. They both try to steal each other's electrons, and the electrons are right in the middle. They're stuck in the middle. Okay, the idea clear? That's clear, right? Is this clear to everyone? Ubayan, Swaib, is this clear? Amna?
Yes, sir.
Achha, so now you have a point. Now we're talking about properties now, right? Now compare this with ionic, right? In ionic, what happened was that you had a metal and you had a non-metal. The metal would lose electrons because metals always like to lose electrons, and they would become positive ions. The other one would gain electrons and they would become negative ions. Over here, the situation is different. In ionic bonding, you have ions forming. Over here, you don't have ions forming. There is no charge. No one ends up gaining or losing electrons. The electrons are stuck in the middle. Now, either ja rahe, na either ja rahe. They're stuck in the middle. So covalent molecules, they don't have a charge, right? No one has a charge because they don't gain or lose electrons. The electrons are right stuck in the middle. Okay? The same applies to this oxygen, these 2 oxygen atoms. The electrons are stuck in the middle. No one ended up gaining or losing electrons. The first thing is they don't have a charge. Like ions in ionic bonding, where they lose and gain electrons, over here, no one is gaining or losing electrons. So they don't have a charge. So what is the structure like? They don't have a charge. All these molecules that we have drawn, all of them, they don't have any charge whatsoever. The first thing, take properties of covalent bonds or molecules. Now, properties of covalent molecules is that if they ask for the structure, these are known as simple molecular. It's known as a simple molecular lattice or arrangement. If it's a solid, then it would be a lattice. So that is how you're going to describe. These are the words, specific words that you're going to use. Simple molecular arrangement. What that basically means is that when a hydrogen molecule is formed, so there's a hydrogen atom, and they both start fighting over their 1 electron, right? So they end up. So at the end of the day, they end up sharing electrons, right? So that's one molecule. And remember, it doesn't have a charge because no one gained or lost electron. Now, there are going to be other molecules as well. So there's not going to be just one H2 molecule. There will be other H2 molecules as well. So here's another H2 molecule. Here's another H2 molecule. Here's another H2 molecule. Now, if they're all neutral and if they all don't have a charge, or yes, clear, Urva, is this clear? They don't have a charge. So, Ayan, is this clear, Abdullah?
Yes, sir.
They don't have a charge. They didn't gain or lose electrons, right? So none of them, they don't have any charge. Will they be attracting each other if they don't have a charge? Will there be any force of attraction between them? Or will they, if you don't have any charge, if you're neutral, there won't be any force of attraction, right? Or there will be almost no force of attraction. In ionic bonds, you had a very strong force of attraction. Ionic पे अगर वापस आए ना, in ionic bonds, you had a pretty strong force of attraction. Why? Because you had ions. You had a positive ion attracted to a negative ion, which was attracted to a positive ion, and they were forming these strong lattices where all the particles were all very, very strongly attracted to each other because they were ions. यहाँ पे they don't attract each other. Once they form a molecule, most molecules are kind of independent. They don't attract each other that much. So unlike ionic bonding, covalent molecules they don't really attract each other. So what this simple molecular arrangement is that there would be very weak intermolecular forces. These are known as intermolecular forces. There would be hardly any attractive force between them. But there's some very, very weak attractive forces. These are known as van der Waals forces. So you can assume that there are hardly any forces, very weak intermolecular forces. And why do they have very weak? Because since all molecules are neutral. So neutral things don't attract neutral things. And since they're not attracting each other, then every molecule is kind of independent. It's free to move around. So if it wants to go over here, if no one is stopping anyone, they're not attracting each other. Unlike ionic lattices, where the positive and negative ions were tightly held together, covalent ke andar, molecules ke andar, you don't have any attractive forces. They're just freely moving around. If they're freely moving around, what state are they in? And what about, are they liquids, gases, or solids? कौन सी state है? Like if the particles are freely moving around. It's going to be gas, Abdullah. It's going to be gas. Abdullah, यही नाम है? नाम change किया हुआ है?
Yes, sir.
ये अब्दुल्ला ही है ना? ठीक है. मैं अगर किसी का गलत नाम ले रहा हूँ तो फिर मुझे बता देना, ठीक है? अच्छा, so first thing is they all have weak low melting and boiling points. They've got low melting and boiling points, and they're mostly gases. Because they don't attract each other. The particles are freely moving around. They've got low melting and boiling points. They'll ask you for an explanation for that. And the simple explanation in the paper that you're going to write is that molecules have weak intermolecular forces. You can use the word intermolecular forces, which can easily be broken. So most of them are gases. ये जितने भी molecules we did above, most of them are gases. Hydrogen is a gas, carbon dioxide is a gas, HCN is a gas, HCl is a gas. So most of the molecules that we did were gases. CF4 is a gas. So most of them are gases. Some of them will be liquids, like water is a liquid, but water evaporates very quickly. The water molecules, they just fly around very easily. They don't, they evaporate very easily. So they're either mostly gases or they're low boiling point liquids or solids. So even if they are solids, they would have BP का मतलब low boiling point है, ठीक है? So or they are low boiling point liquids or solids. But most of them are still gases. So that's one main property of so all get properties, and they don't conduct electricity. Why? Because they don't have any charges. Remember, these molecules, they have no charges. They did not form ions, so they don't have any charged particles. So no electricity conduction. So no electricity conduction means, and the reason for that, why don't they conduct electricity? Because no charged particles, ions or free moving electrons. No free moving charged particles. It's a screen stuck here. Can you hear me? Was I? Haris, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, no electricity conduction. Why? Because no charged particles, no free moving charged particles. So no ions, electrons freely moving around. So that's one main, and then there's another one, which is that solubility varies. But some are soluble and some are not soluble. There are multiple reasons for that, but most of the reasons are not important at the moment. Okay, so solubility varies a lot. All you have to do is you should know that which ones are soluble. And when we talk about solubility, remember, okay, planet Earth ke upar na everything, all chemistry that happens is happening in water. Like our bodies are full of water, our blood is water, our cells have water in them. Plants, they exist on water. I mean, it's so water is the main medium in which all the chemistry happens. The particles are all floating around in water. So just remember that when we talk about solubility, we're talking about solubility of water. जहां से आप water remove कर देते हो ना, chemistry stops. ठीक है, most of the chemistry on planet Earth cannot happen without water. The moment there is no water, Sahara Desert, hai, you won't see any chemistry happening. You won't see any reaction happening. You won't see any plants growing. You won't see any animals living, right? Moon ke upar, what's the problem there? There is no water there, right? So most of the chemistry that happens on planet Earth happens as water being the medium. All the particles are flowing around in water, right? So इस पे आ जाते हैं, solubility varies in water, and so I'll write a few molecules. HCl, NH3 are some molecules that are very soluble. HCl is hydrochloric acid, it makes hydrochloric acid, and NH3 is a very pungent smelling gas. और बस एक आध ये कर लेते हैं कि you should know that carbon dioxide is slightly soluble, very slightly soluble. Like when you open a can of fizzy drinks, it's carbon dioxide that is dissolved in those fizzy drinks, but it's slightly soluble. So all of a sudden, when you let go of the cap, most of the carbon dioxide, it comes out in the form of bubbles. So all those fizzy drinks, they've got this slightly soluble. If it had been very, very soluble, then it would not have formed bubbles. It would have stayed inside the Coke or Pepsi or whatever you're drinking, right? But since it's very slightly soluble, so it comes out of it becomes undissolved. So then you've got other gases like O2 and H2 and N2, these are not soluble. So okay, that kind of sums up what covalent bonding is all about. Okay, just remember this, that this is how a covalent molecule looks like. Neutral, uncharged molecules, since they're neutral, they don't attract each other. So they're just freely randomly moving around. That's what liquid water is. That's what gases around you are. Oxygen gas, nitrogen gas, they're all just freely moving around. Hydrogen gas. So make sure you know the correct wording. इसका मैं बोर्ड का लिंक भी सेंड कर दूंगा. And when you think of ionic bond, think of this. In ionic bonding, this is the structure. In that case, the particles do attract each other, and they attract each other very strongly. You got a positive ion attracted to a negative ion, they're all attracted to each other. So they form crystals. They're all very strong solids. Marble, concrete, ionic salts, these are all your ionic compounds. Okay? So there's a major difference between the properties of covalent molecules and ionic compounds. These are giant structures. Covalent molecules are these tiny molecules which just have two atoms. So one other thing about this is that ionic crystals are giant crystals. They can have lots of positive and negative ions all attracted to each other. Covalent molecules, on the other hand, these are tiny independent molecules. They don't have anything to do with each other. H2 ka molecule, that's independent. It's just roaming around. There's another H2 molecule independent from the other ones, right? So they don't have anything to do with each other. So, ठीक है, कोई question नहीं इसमें clear है? Worksheet please send कर दो उसमें group में, ठीक है?
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Classroom के ऊपर, group पे नहीं, classroom, Google Classroom, ठीक है? Make sure you can just open Google Classroom and type the code there, ठीक है? चलो ठीक है, कल बात करते हैं इस पे.
Okay, sir.
Allah Hafiz.
Okay, Allah Hafiz. Baki, remember at 8 I'll have an organic class, okay? Organic, it's those who have October, November exams only. Baki को इतना उसका फायदा नहीं होगा.
Sir, 8 today?
हाँ, in 30 minutes, ठीक है?
Okay, sir.
Okay, Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.
Bye.